Okay, moving on. Well, not really ready to move on. And I'll tell you why. This is my follow-up to the unboxing video I did on the Ryansword Tachi, where on camera you got to see me get disappointed because I didn't get what I thought I was paying for. And I did my homework. I've seen the reviews, and while there are a few happy, glowing ones about the products that they received from Ryansword, there were a lot more disappointed people to a couple of really shocking, horrifying, disturbing stories. And yeah, I probably should have listened to those guys, but there were a couple of reasons why I was tempted to roll the dice. One of which I mentioned in my previous review of the Ryansword Tachi is that not a lot of people make Tachi. And Ryansword had a nice selection of attractive looking offerings, one of which really caught my eye, and their prices were disturbingly good, which is a term I use now as compared to encouragingly good. There were also other swords on their website, variations of things that I had seen from other manufacturers, but at about 30% cheaper, which at this point I'm not thinking was a good thing. So on the video, you got to see me unsheath and ungrease this thing for the first time and discover the blade was not what I thought I was paying for. What was advertised on the website was a 1095 folded steel Han Sanmai blade. And at this point, I'm pretty confident from visual inspection that's not what I got. That this sword looks like, clearly, a featureless mono steel blade. Now, I've been dealing with swords and collecting for long enough, especially all the acquisitions I've gotten in the last year or so, that I feel like I've gotten to the point where I can just visually tell the difference in steels, that I can see a color difference. Maybe I'm losing my mind. You should probably tell me if I am or not. Between something like a 1060 5160 and something higher carbon like a 1095 T10. And this looks like a 1095 T10 mono steel blade. But beyond the fact of the color of the steel, there's no sign of folding, there's no hata grain, there is no sign of transitions in the metal, nor are there when I took off the handle and looked at the tang. This is mono steel. Now it is actually clay tempered. It's not a bad blade. It's clay tempered. The edge is sharp evenly. It's very nicely sharp. All the planes are well done. It's mirror polished, but it's nicely polished, and that is a real temper line. And I have tested the hardness. It's about a 58 to 60 Rockwell on the edge and probably around a 50 on the spine. So it's a tough sword, which makes me consider that maybe they accidentally did me a favor by sending me the mono steel blade. Given the reputation of their laminated blades, I may have received something that would have been too fragile to use safely. And this one definitely isn't, and we'll talk about that. So, however, this similar sword on the site that was mono steel, there's about $100 difference in price. So we're talking the difference between $350 and $250. So not a lot of money to begin with, but still I figure that's kind of what I'm out if I even want to think in those terms, and I'm not quite sure how I want to think at this point because of, yeah. Okay, so what happened next? Well, I wrote him and said that based on my visual inspection and what's on the certificate, and the serial number on the certificate matches the number that's on the tang. It says the sword is 1095 Maru, mono steel unfolded construction. So they wrote me back and said that the certificate was wrong. They sent me the wrong one, that they'll send me a certificate that says the sword is Han Sanmai and it'll all be better. It's like, that's not how this works. So I wrote them back and insisted, no, the certificate is right, because on visual inspection, this is clearly a featureless mono steel blade. It's not, there's no Damascus grain line or sign of transition in steels whatsoever. And they wrote me back to say that I was wrong, that it was indeed a Damascus folded Han Sanmai laminated blade, and to prove it, they sent me pictures of the sword from the website. Which, in my mind, is like me going and buying a package of ground beef at the grocery store, getting it home, opening it up, and discovering ground chicken, and writing to the manufacturer and saying I got ground chicken, and they say no, it's ground beef, and to prove it they send me a picture of ground beef. Not that ground chicken is bad. Give me some ground chicken, I can make you some nice spring rolls or maybe a nice Italian wedding soup or something, but it wasn't what I was expecting. On the other hand, maybe I'm lucky that I didn't get food poisoning from bad ground beef. So, I might be ahead of this game. Better to have a cheaper but good quality useful sword than a nicer but broken one. So I don't know what I want to happen out of this. So I wrote them back again, and I explained my long history and my extensive collection and how, yes, I do know the difference, and then sent them close-up pictures of this featureless piece of steel. To which they wrote me back and said, well, you know, it's Chinese New Year and the factory's closed, so we'll look into it. Okay, better. But still, the first two emails, so not good. But let's talk about the sword itself. Why the mistake might not be a mistake, even though I remain irritated. And probably will not buy anything else from them. So, yeah. All right, so what did I get? What I got was a decent sword. 28-inch blade. 10.75-inch Suka. They said it was 10.5, so they're up by 1/4 of an inch, but that's no big deal. The weight, I guess 2.5 pounds. It's 2 pounds 9 ounces. I was so close. Point of balance, pretty much exactly 3 inches. So yeah, that's what I thought it was, and I'm getting good at this, guys. So, all right. Now, I specifically also got a sword that had a deeper sori. One is because I'm having that conversation on the difference between gunto and katana, and I did actually make a significant amount of that video and then lost it with my D drive, so that set me back a bit, but I will recreate that as soon as I get out of being snowed in and rained in here. The sori, as measured traditionally from the kasaki tip to the munamachi, the notch here at the hibaki, you take a straight line between the two and then you measure the difference. 2.8 centimeters, which is what they said, and it's what it is. It's about a little less than 1.25 inches. Now, it doesn't sound like much, but then you add the koshi sori, which is the extra curve that you get between the blade and the hilt, which about doubles that. And still, that doesn't sound like a lot until you consider blade alignment based on grip alignment. If you're used to holding a sword a certain way in your hands and then expecting to know where the blade is, there's actually, I'll post a picture, quite a big difference. Especially when you're talking about your tip and your monouchi, your primary cutting surface. It's about a 5-inch difference in where that sword is based on where you're used to it being. And I think that played into the issues I had with cutting. For me, it's like buying a new firearm that's got a different barrel to grip angle. Doesn't mean it's a bad gun and is not accurate, but I'd be used to a gun pointing a certain way for me. I'd have to get used to the new way. So, yeah. That, and one of the things I mentioned in the other videos is the grip on this thing. It's not an axe handle, but it is fat and kind of round. And I think that played into the problems I had. What problems did I have? Well, since I was not happy with the sword, and therefore not terribly attached to it, I did take it out and do some semi-abusive cutting with it. I had a bunch of heavy cardboard to cut up, and I didn't care what happened to the sword, so I kind of unleashed and went after it. And for more downward cuts, whether I'm talking about a straight vertical or angular kesagiri, or even more angular, what I call more shallow angles, what I call yokomanuchi cuts, it did fine. It cut really well. When I got to horizontals, the mayoko cuts and things like that, it didn't do as well, but then I tend to suck at those cuts anyway, so I wasn't surprised, but all of my rising cuts failed. I either didn't make it all the way through the target and or lost edge alignment before I got through the target. And I think that's a combination of the blade being in a different place than where I expected it to be, and the roundness of the handle making it harder for me to get a good index and keep a good index on the edge. So that might need to be changed if I make some modifications to this sword, which I probably will. So I'm going to basically say it wasn't the sword, it was me not fitting the sword, and we'll see if that's going to change over time in practice. So the first couple of cutting sessions I had, very mixed. But the sword held up really well. Cardboard is notoriously abrasive, the steel, and there is not a mark on this thing. So that's impressive. And everything stayed tight. So that's impressive. What's not so impressive? All right. Thinking I got some decent ground chicken here at least to work with. Let's take a look at the, shall we say, the packaging that it came in. Let's start from the user end. The fixtures, very mixed bag. I mean, they're all solid brass, which is cool, but the casting quality is very uneven. Some of the castings are great and some are stupidly muddy, especially around the sides where they're cast. And it's really weird how it alternates. The Kabutegane Kashira the sides are not good. The Fuchi, the sides are great. The Koiguchi, terrible. The Ashi, good. The Kojiri, terrible. So it's like bad, good, bad. With no rhyme nor reason. And even beyond that, there were other problems with it. There was a lot of sharp flash left over. There was some on the pommel, on the ends here, that I had to get rid of. But the Koiguchi, oh my God, there was a razor fishhook on it that took me a long time to file off, and it tried to cut me every time I grabbed a hold of the scabbard mouth. So that was bad. The fit of the Fuchi. It doesn't look bad now. It's not terribly in line with the rest of the scabbard, but before it was, but then that made it not in line with the hilt. It was lopsided and oversized, and I had to hammer and reshape and file to make it fit. Glaringly terrible. The sarute, the lanyard loop. Oh dear. It's tacked in. This is the same thing that I complained about in the Ryansword, where there's not a hole through it in grommets. It's kind of hammered on, but it's not remotely straight. So I don't know what I'm going to do with that. It's very crooked. If I just undo it and put it back in, there'll be a gouge in my same, but I don't know, I can kind of cosmetically correct that, or I could drill it out and put the grommets in like a Gunto has. I don't know. We'll see what happens. The good, though, the Minuki, which aren't bad, are actually in what I would consider, traditionally speaking, the right position. A lot of reproduction guys get this wrong. These are in what are known as the palm position. So they're under the palm of your hand, not the fingers when you grip it. So not a lot of people get that one, but they got it right on this thing. Took it apart. It is signed on both sides. I did not translate the inscriptions. It's got the serial number and the brand logo stamp from Ryansword. But a couple of problems with the tang. The file marks and everything were nice, and like I said, it didn't show any signs of lamination or anything like that. But they did the same thing that a lot of cheap reproduction makers do, is they just jammed the hilt onto the tang and then drilled the pinholes through and then didn't clean it up. So there was a lot of metal flash binding the tang to the hilt that I had to clean up. There was also, for a sword that was supposedly made in January of 2021, disturbing amount of rust right in the middle of the tang. So I'm not sure what happened there. You shouldn't be rusting inside quite so fast. So that was a worrisome feature. A couple of other worrisome features. The habaki, while it is attractive and has this nice rain kind of grass pattern, whatever you want to call it on there, it just doesn't look like it fits the blade. It looks too small. So it's like a sore thumb kind of a thing. It just doesn't look right. Also, for whatever reason, for me, the seppa just don't look like they fit this sword at all. So I may have to swap out some parts or reshape some parts, and we'll see what happens. Well, I've got time on my hands here and a sword that needs something, maybe several somethings. Talk about the saya. One of the things that came up on the unboxing video is there were two massive wads of wood paste just right inside the scabbard mouth. They look like somebody stuck chewing gum in there. I know that's what I called them. They weren't chewing gum, they were wood paste. But they had to go. And then I had to use my patented secret technique to refit that. But while I was doing that, I realized I had another problem. The metal Koiguchi was overlapping the wood quite a bit. So no matter how carefully I tried to draw this thing, metal was rubbing against metal, and I got a loud swing every single time. So, yeah, that needed some filing and some beveling, and thankfully, again, snowed in, had some time on my hands. So now, there's a little binding still, but mostly the fit is nice and snug, and there's no rattle. So that's now good. The wrapping on the saya. Well, first of all, let's talk about the Sugeo. On the original picture of the product and how it came, there was a Sugeo that's a Tachi Sugeo. It's designed to actually tie it to your waist. And what they gave me is this stuff. This cheap synthetic that I've tried before because it was cheap to wrap swords, and it's terrible for wrapping swords. You can't get good diamonds with it. At least I can't get good diamonds with it. It's just super stretchy, and it frays really easily. For a Sugeo, I would have better results if I used like the worn out old elastic from my underwear than this stuff. And I've actually seen people complain about this, and Ryansword will say, well, it's better than silk. It's like, yeah, in what way exactly? Because it melts? So that had to go. Thankfully, though, unlike the Luay sword, which is back there on the wall, I had suspected the Luay sword that underneath the Sugeo there was no diamond wrapping, and I was right. So I fixed that. It was an easy fix, so I'm not unhappy with them. It's a little bit annoying. But on this one, the wrap is nice and tight and reasonably even, but it's interesting. You've got same, you've got same, and then no same. Like they missed a piece, and I'm just like, it doesn't make any sense, and it's kind of visually like, what? So I don't know what I'm going to do about that. Real leather on the loops, and the frogs are reasonably solid. The wood on the scabbard is reasonably attractive. So yeah, mixed bag. I would say it's not a terrible sword. It has potential as a project, and I do have the skills to do the work. So I don't know how I should feel about it in terms of, yeah. And given my experience so far with Ryansword, and like I said, I'm probably not going to do further business. I don't even know what kind of resolution I want. Do I want them to send me some bad ground beef to replace my reasonably good ground chicken? And yeah, I think that's going to be the name of the sword. Ground chicken. Yeah. So let's open the discussion in the comments. If you've had experience with the Ryansword, let's commiserate. Let's share some stories here, and I will update you as I get further responses and or do other things with this sword. Like I said, I will probably, because of its sori added into the conversation of the differences in swordsmanship techniques between Gunto and Katana. This definitely fits in that wheelhouse, one of the reasons why I got it. And until then, hope you found this one interesting, or at least a good warning, potentially. And I hope to see you again.